It's a choice between two very different visions of America.
Joe Biden makes his final pitch to voters ahead of a crucial midterm election that threatens to derail his presidency. And Donald Trump campaigns for his Republican allies as the party looks to seize control of Congress. I'm Kerry Johnston. This is Aljazeera live from Doha. Also coming up, we're in the swing state of Arizona, where inflation and high living costs are the biggest issues at the ballot box.
We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator.
A dire warning from the UN Secretary General at the COP27 Climate Summit. Plus, a call for help from migrants stuck on board rescue ships docked in Italy. Authorities are preventing hundreds of people from coming to shore. We begin in the United States, where Democrats and Republicans are making last-ditch appeals on the final night of campaigning before Tuesday's crucial midterm elections. The vote could upend Joe Biden's presidency if Republicans manage to reclaim control of both houses of Congress. President Joe Biden has been at a rally in Maryland. He assured voters the country is heading in the right direction.
Remember, the power's in your hands. You're one of the reasons why I've never been more optimistic about America's future. Look, America's reasserting ourselves, leading the world in the 21st century. As I've traveled this country and the world, I see great nation because I know we're a good people. We just have to remember who in the hell we are. We are the United States of America. And there's nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together. So vote.
Well, former President Donald Trump has promised to make a big announcement on November the 15th. Trump has hinted at another run for the presidency, but has yet to officially confirm his candidacy. He's been campaigning for Republican candidates in Ohio.
This country has gone crazy. There's only one choice to end this madness. If you support the decline and fall of America, then you must, absolutely must, vote for the radical left crazy people, the radical left Democrats. And if you want to stop the destruction of our country and save the American dream, then tomorrow you must vote Republican in a giant red wave that we've all been hearing about.
Alan Fisher has been monitoring those final campaign pushes from Washington, D.C.
You get an idea of how much the Democrats are struggling in that Joe Biden in the last 2 days of the campaign has been in places that you would expect there to be a fairly sizable Democratic majority. So the fact that he's been in New York and Maryland suggests that he knows things aren't going well. And then political nerds wait for the University of Virginia's big poll on the eve of elections, and we find out that they are suggesting that there's going to be a big win for the Republicans in the House, that they're probably going to have a net gain of 24 seats, which is at the more cataclysmic side of the predictions for the Democrats. And they're also suggesting that Herschel Walker will win his seat in Georgia. The other seats will stay as they are. But if Herschel Walker wins in Georgia, that will give the Republicans a one-seat majority in the Senate. So very little good news for the Democrats here. If there is one sliver of light there for them, it is that if the Republicans win by about 24 seats, it means that the Republican leadership can govern without the need to really go cap in hand to the people that would be regarded by some Republicans and certainly by the Democrats as the more extreme wing of the Republican Party. And so perhaps there's some movement for working with the president and getting things done. But on the face of it, from the University of Virginia, it looks as if tomorrow could be a bad day for Democrats and in particular for Joe Biden and the White House.
Aljazeera's Cyril Vanier has more on what's at stake on Tuesday and how it all works.
They're called midterms because they come right in the middle of the president's four-year term. Here's what's at stake. All 435 seats in the House of Representatives, where the Democrats currently hold only a tiny 8-seat majority, and 35 of the Senate's 100 seats. Right now, the Senate is evenly divided, so that means a change of control in just one seat could put the Republicans in charge. With all that voting across the country, the election really comes down to only a few battleground states. Only 10 of those 35 Senate races are really competitive. In the House, it's about 50 out of 435. Joe Biden is not on any of these ballots, yet midterms are traditionally seen as a test of the president's strength. If his Democratic Party does poorly, then it could make it almost impossible for Biden to get anything done over the next 2 years. Also, Congress isn't the only thing Americans are voting on. 36 of the 50 U.S. states are also electing governors. That list includes places like Florida, like Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, all of which will be important battlegrounds in the next presidential election in 2024. And 27 states are electing their Secretary of State. Usually when we say that, I know we mean America's top diplomat, but not here. At the state level, it means a completely different thing. It refers to the official who oversees administrative services like professional licensing or registering corporations. And crucially, in most states, the Secretary of State is also in charge of elections. And that is suddenly more important than ever because of the elephant in the room, Donald Trump. And more than 300 Republicans who are on the ballot at every level this midterm falsely believe that the 2020 presidential election was flawed, or they have repeated Trump's claim without evidence that the election was stolen from him. Bottom line, people who reject America's last presidential election could end up in charge of running the next one. 2 years after voters gave Joe Biden a chance and ousted Trump, the election itself now appears to be on the ballot. And you could argue, so is the future of democracy in America.
With just hours to go before votes are cast, polls show that the economy is the top concern for people heading to the ballot box. Rob Reynolds reports from the swing state of Arizona, where many Americans are struggling with rising inflation.
In Tucson, Arizona, inflation has made father of two Justin Little's grocery shopping a lot more complicated.
Whenever we plan our meals, we usually unfortunately go to the meat first to see what's on sale, and then just kind of have to build from there. So it always kind of depends on what is affordable at that time. It depends on what you eat. You get to that point where you feel like you have no choice but to go to the grocery store and curse later.
Inflation is running at an annual rate of 8.2% nationwide, and even worse here in Arizona, where in some cities the rate is 13%. It's not just about food.
Especially with gas prices, it's crazy. I used to fill up my tank with like 20 bucks. Now it's 40.
Senior citizen Lanny Betts, who lives on a fixed income, is tightening his belt, literally.
When it comes to food, we're doing all right. Losing a little bit of weight, so that's a positive thing to look at.
Inflation is dominating the political landscape in the days leading up to Election Day, with Republican candidates hammering their Democratic opponents, claiming they are to blame for the price of food, fuel, and the cost of renting a home. Polls consistently show that inflation and the state of the economy is the #1 concern of voters all across the country. The high cost of living is likely to be the issue that determines the outcome of the midterm elections. Analysts say inflation worries are hurting Democrats in swing states like Arizona.
I think inflation nationally is a huge issue for voters. And if you're a senior citizen living on a fixed income, watching your rent go up, or watching your grocery bill go up, watching your gas bill go up, that's something you're definitely going to think about when you get your ballot and you fill it out.
Americans' political future could hinge, at least in part, on something as mundane as the price of peanut butter. Rob Reynolds, Aljazeera, Tucson, Arizona.
And our coverage on polling day begins at 0100 GMT on Wednesday. We'll have correspondents across the US, plus reaction to the results from a wide range of analysts. The UN Secretary-General has warned the world is losing the fight against climate change. Addressing the COP27 summit in the Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh, Antonio Guterres described climate change as a defining issue of our age. He says crises such as the war in Ukraine and the rising cost of living can't be used as excuses to put climate action on the back burner.
The clock is ticking. We are in the fight of our lives, and we are losing. Greenhouse gas emissions keep growing. Global temperatures keep rising. And our planet is fast approaching tipping points that will make climate chaos irreversible. We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot still on the accelerator.
More than 25 countries have agreed to hold each other accountable on a pledge to end deforestation by 2030, announcing billions of dollars to finance their efforts. The group includes Japan, Pakistan and the UK, but does not include Brazil or the Democratic Republic of Congo, both home to vast areas of under-threat forests. Indigenous leaders have renewed calls for funding promised at the Glasgow summit last year. Italy's government is being sued by humanitarian organisations for rejecting migrants rescued at sea. 2 foreign-owned ships are refusing to leave the Sicilian port of Catania, with hundreds of migrants and refugees who've been denied entry until the decision is reversed. Tony Berkeley reports.
They survived a harrowing sea crossing from Africa, but they've been refused entry into Italy and have been caught in a political stalemate. The Italian government says they have to leave. The ship's crew is refusing until everyone is allowed off.
We will never leave the port as long as there's one person on board our vessel which has the right for international protection, which has the right to reach safe land.
2 rescue ships, Humanity One and Geo Barents, arrived in the Sicilian port of Catania on Saturday with a total of 621 migrants. Only around 450 were allowed to stay. The Italian government says they were not vulnerable and should be repatriated to Germany and Norway, which operate the ships that carried out the rescues. The right-wing Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni pledged a crackdown on migrants during her election campaign. Those aboard the Humanity One and Geo Barents are feeling the effects of that. But humanitarian groups have started legal action against the Italian government.
There was a discrimination also in the moment when someone go out of the ship. Okay, we don't know how. We know how this selection was made. Okay, and we think that it was not a selection based on with the right method.
Humanitarian organisations say that the Italian government is clearly in breach of the United Nations Convention on Human Rights and that they are confident of winning any legal battle, but that takes time and it still leaves hundreds of migrants living in a political no man's land.
Critics of the government say it is playing political games, and thousands more migrants enter Italy under their own means or are rescued by the Italian Coast Guard. And those saved by foreign ships represent only a small percentage. But the trauma for those stranded on the ships can only get worse.
They have fear in their eyes and that they are pushed back into international waters, maybe even pushed back to Libya. So all the memories come up on their journey, what they experienced, saw people dying, saw people going missing in front of them. They don't want to go back to these places.
As winter sets in and seas become rougher, one thing is certain: more migrants will need to be rescued and more will die. Tony Berkeley, Aljazeera, Catania, Sicily.
US support for Ukraine in the war against Russia may depend on who controls Congress. Senior Republicans have hinted they may reduce aid for Kyiv. That's left many worried, as Harry Fawcett reports from the Ukrainian capital.
There's been some good news in the last few days as far as the Ukrainian leadership is concerned when it comes to US military aid. After the visit here to Kyiv on Friday of the US National Security Advisor, there was an announcement of another $400 million worth of US military aid to Ukraine, some of that going to pay for half of 90 Czech tanks that are going to be modernized and sent to the Ukrainian military. That's going to bring to $19.8 billion the total amount. And President Zelensky has over the weekend been talking about further reinforcements in the pipeline for Ukraine's air defenses as well. But there is some concern here in Kyiv about what might happen after the US midterm elections on Tuesday. One prominent Trump supporter, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, saying that if Republicans win that election, there should be not another penny sent to Ukraine. the leader of the House Republicans, saying that there should not be a blank check for Ukraine either, although he later clarified that, saying that it was about oversight, not withdrawing aid altogether. And the Biden administration, according to a report in the Washington Post, has privately been asking President Zelensky to show some kind of signal of willingness towards negotiation with Russia. Not so much because they want those negotiations to start, but they're worried that the alliance, that Western countries might be showing some signs of Ukraine fatigue, and they want to stop that from happening. People here wondering if there'll be any signs of Ukraine fatigue within US politics after Tuesday's elections.
Teresa Fallon is the director of the Center for Russia-Europe-Asia Studies. She says the outcome of the election could become important for Ukraine's future.
Europe is watching this so closely. In addition to President Putin in Moscow and President Zelensky in Kiev, this is an existential issue for Ukraine. So I would suggest that there is kind of growing fatigue in some areas of Europe, depending on the country. And I think that the US has carried the burden quite heavily, that President Biden does have key funds and has been very careful in the way that this has been given to Ukraine. I think Ukraine is really motivated because they understand the election cycle within the US. And so they have been really pushing very hard to make successes, because Americans like winners. If they look like they're losing, they're not going to get support from them. So I think that the Ukrainians have been fighting and very highly motivated. I think that the Russians, it has been proven that, they're not doing so well. But if they are pushed early to the negotiation table, the big fear here in Europe is that Russia will then regroup, hold on to their gains, and then attack Ukraine several years down the road. So I think we really have to push hard to get a settlement in Ukraine that does not give Russia another chance to rearm and then reconquer.
The Council of Europe has held its first meeting of a group designed to promote human rights, the rule of law and democracy within Belarus. Representatives from the opposition and civil society groups met council members in Strasbourg. The Council's Committee of Ministers has suspended relations with Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko. Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya is the leader of the Belarusian Democratic Movement. She ran against Lukashenko in the presidential election of 2020, which was widely seen as fraudulent, before being forced to flee the country when a crackdown on the opposition began. She explains why the contact group was formed.
And the goal of this organization was to help countries to be, countries like Belarus, to be more stable in their governance. And it's a huge mistake that we were the only country in Europe not a member of Council of Europe. And now we correct this mistake, I would say. Council of Europe has expertise and contacts that would help us to rebuild Belarus after so long dictatorship. And perhaps it will not happen tomorrow. We are not in democracy now, but I hope it will happen very soon. And free and democratic Belarus is in the interest of Council of Europe and all its members. It will make Belarus safer and reliable. And I know that Lukashenko is very upset that we started to build such cooperation. It's another hit on his legitimacy. And also it's a strong message to Belarusians that they are welcome in Europe.
Some of those killed in a plane crash in Tanzania have been laid to rest. A mass funeral was organised to honour the victims of the crash, which killed at least 19 people on Sunday. The service was attended by Tanzania's Prime Minister. The aircraft, operated by Precision Air, crashed into Lake Victoria as it attempted to land in a nearby town. One of the survivors recounted her ordeal.
As we were landing, there was bad weather. We had a big crash and I immediately started seeing water enter the plane. Passengers started to struggle to rescue themselves. The only thing that helped me until I survived was that I managed to remove my seatbelt and get out of the seat in time. But the plane had already flooded with water, so I struggled to swim up, and that's when one of the cabin crew members helped us open the emergency door. After a few minutes, local fishermen came to rescue us when we got out.
A US aid worker has been killed in central Baghdad in what police say could have been an attempted kidnapping. The man was fatally shot in his car after being cut off by the assailants. His wife and children were with him but survived the attack. Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani says the incident is being investigated. Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan has called for more rallies, hoping to force the government to call an early election. But some shopkeepers trying to keep their businesses afloat say Khan, whose party controls major provinces, should stop fueling chaos and focus on repairing the economy. Zain Basravi has more from Lahore.
After being voted out of office, Imran Khan founded a protest movement he branded a revolution, an out-of-season re-election campaign, now in its 8th month. Seemingly indifferent to people struggling with a broken economy, apparently unflinching in the face of devastating floods, and undeterred even by attempted assassination. His popularity seems bulletproof, but his critics may be growing in number. Nasim Zakir grew up on these streets. He's been painting signs for local businesses for decades. He can't hear or speak. But there is no mistaking what he thinks of the former prime minister. You don't need to understand sign language to know he is not a fan. Khan started out strong in politics, Nasim says, but he's lost his way. There is no shortage of Imran Khan supporters wherever you go in the country, but in Pakistan's marketplaces, you will find his critics who say that endless protests and countless rallies are bad for business. Disruption and chaos in pursuit of political comeback. Some Lahoris say it isn't helping anyone but Khan himself.
He's like a monkey with a matchstick. Whether he wants to set someone on fire or set the whole jungle on fire, it's up to him. The nation is proud of him, but as far as politics go, everyone is just worried about their personal interests. Politicians should work together for the country, not just themselves.
Imran Khan is a good guy, but right now he's just trying to take advantage of the situation. The country is going downhill, but every politician is worried about themselves. These long marches, these rallies, no one is worried about the people, and the cost of living keeps rising.
For as long as they've had a country, working-class Pakistanis say they've been beaten down by divisive politics. The poor are getting poorer, and the mood on the street is leaders, political and military, don't care, putting themselves or their party before country. For Lahore's business owners, the numbers don't lie. The only path to lasting political success, they say, is the economy. Zain Basravi, Aljazeera, Lahore.
Ethiopia's government and rebels from its northern Tigray region have established a telephone hotline. The move was announced by African Union mediators as a second round of talks get underway in Kenya. The two sides achieved a breakthrough last week in South Africa, signing a deal to stop fighting after 2 years of conflict. UN Human Rights Council's Commission of Inquiry on the occupied Palestinian territory is holding 4 days of public hearings in Geneva. The first day focused on the closure of several Palestinian human rights organizations accused of terrorism. Later, the Commission will discuss the killing of Aljazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who was shot in the head by Israeli forces while on assignment. Osama bin Javed has more from Geneva.
The people who are testifying today, the hearings that continue, know the ground rules and know that this is not a courtroom. This is not going to be admissible evidence, but this is in fact going to make the case for the people who have been designated terrorists by Israel, and also on the case of Shireen Abu Akleh's killing and the surrounding events which happened around it. So far we've heard from at least one organization, which was one of 7 which have been declared terrorists by the Israeli state. We've been speaking to people who say that although this is not a court of appeals, they at least have a space where they can tell people about what goes on in the occupied Palestinian territories. We've heard from the director of Al-Haq charity saying that there is a culture of impunity, whether it's arbitrary detentions, whether it's home demolitions, whether it's illegal settlements. Palestinians are in the occupied territories discriminated against, and the legal system is stacked up against them. So this is the first day, the first of the few the testimonies that we're hearing have begun. It is ongoing. It is where we are going to hear a first-hand account of what goes on through these human rights defenders, and in their words, crossing a red line in Israel every single time when they stand up for basic rights and basic freedoms.
5% of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank have learning or physical disabilities. They face a stigma and have limited opportunities to lead a full life, and the government has scant resources to help. We hear now from a Bethlehem-based organisation that's stepped in to provide support.
I'm Mahira Nassar Gharib. I am responsible for معا للحياة organization. We are a day program for people with intellectual disabilities. Actually, when we first started in 2009, we had no idea about opening a hotel, but due to the difficult financial situation, we had the idea that we have this beautiful building. Why not to have an income-generating project? And this profit that comes from this project is going to help with the sustainability of the organization. We believe that each person is unique. Each person has abilities, talents that can be trained to do better and better. First of all, they are very, very happy to be part of this team. It is obvious when we tell them we have guests, we need your help, let's go to the hotel. It also raises their self-esteem.
Thank you.
Our goal is not just to hire a few people with disabilities at the hotel, but also to change the idea in the whole society and the families as well. Many of the families hide their children. They don't want to speak about them. We can be an example, we can be a sign in the society and show people that people with disabilities are able to be part of their working team.